Welcome to the Coast Podcast. I'm Emily, a virtual assistant agency owner who left Amazon in 2019 to build my dream.
And I'm Whitney, a freelance writer and communications consultant who never felt at home in a cube farm.
We didn't see many people paving their own ways like we decided to, so we created this podcast to talk to others who were brave enough to pick a different path. Creatives, entrepreneurs, people doing their careers and their lives their way.
Join us as we learn from them, get inspired, and show you beautiful paths less traveled.
Not every road leads to the coast, but the ones that do come with a great view.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Coast. I'm Whitney Popa. Emily is otherwise engaged in a meeting today, very popular. So I am here running solo with our guest, Kaylynn Kelley, who is a broker with Compass. And I want to get into that because I feel like Compass is like the trendy brokerage to be with now, and like it has really cute branding and everything. But we'll dig into that a little bit later. For now, I want Kaylynn to lead us off and tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are today, which I know can be an epic journey.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Whitney. I'm so honored to be here. I've been a long time listener, I guess. Well, your podcast is fairly new, but I have listened to every episode and been along on the ride with you and just admiring what you guys are creating. So thank you so much for having me on as a guest.
That is so nice.
So my journey, where to start, right? Everybody has a journey. I came from a real estate family. I'll say I grew up in Central Washington. My dad was an owner broker most of my life. And so I really watched what.
I have to interrupt you you have to tell everyone when you say Central Washington. I bet people know what you're talking about because most of us are Washingtonians. So are we talking Ellensburg?
We are talking Wenatchee, Washington.
Oh!
Yeah, lots of time in Wenatchee and Chelan, and I miss
That's
the
why
weather
you're
for
so
sure.
connected to Chelan. My mom grew up in Waterville, and we just bought a secondary property there.
Oh, goals. My husband and I we really wish we would have bought in Chelan a long time ago, but we're kind of on the hunt too. Yeah, it's such a wonderful place to grow up, and I don't think you really appreciate it until you've grown up yourself, and now you have kids, and you can really kind of look back on what a special community it can tend to be, which is why I think my husband and I really enjoy Edmond so much. He also grew up in Yakima, so.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had to interrupt you because I was like, Central, where are we talking? And people always say Eastern Washington for it, or I have to explain it that way, but it's North Central Washington. So don't get it twisted. And my best friend's from Wenatchee. So
really,
we lived there until, my parents moved around a little bit, but I lived there from like 2 to 4, and then we moved to Olympia after. But since my mom grew up in Waterville and they wanted to be close for a while, they lived in Wenatchee for about 2 years. And my dad always said it's like the best place that he ever lived or worked.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. I have to ask, who's your best friend? Maybe we know each other.
Her maiden name is Carly Wood.
I don't.
She went to Wenatchee High School and all of that.
Well, we'll have to offline talk about when she graduated, because we dare reveal here on the podcast when I graduated.
Oh yeah, we're 2004, so no shame on us.
Yeah, not too far behind, actually. Not too far there. Yeah, we may have just missed each other. Actually, that's probably what happened. Yeah. So long story short, Winnie, I grew up in a real estate family, and I just, I saw what my dad, how important he was to the lives of his clients and the impact that he made in the community. My parents were pretty philanthropic, particularly around the horse care community. There used to be, not as much as anymore, but a horse community in Wenatchee, and my parents really gave back through that organization. So I grew up just really idolizing the role of a real estate agent. When I went off to college, I thought, I'll go into real estate afterwards. And I did. And I had I was actually very successful as a broker afterwards. But the picture that I had for myself, just didn't materialize at that time because we were kind of heading into the rocky economic conditions that we saw come from the mortgage crash. So I saw just a lot of really unfortunate things happening in the industry. And I just thought, this isn't what I wanted for myself. I wanted to participate in people's lives in a more meaningful way instead of what it was a very investor heavy and just, I think there were some crazy unethical practices happening. So I also had graduated from University of Washington and paid a ton of money for a college degree, right? So I was like, I am getting into marketing. I'm going to go off and do a whole different career. And so I spent, I want to say 2 decades in digital marketing and consulting. And I really loved the work. It was really creative. And I continue to be part of the tech community still, but I just really felt this tug that I was always always supposed to be an entrepreneur for one, but always really pulled into real estate in one form or fashion. And when my husband and I started thinking about what was right for our family in terms of our own, whether we should stay in Edmonds or move or do any number of things, I just found this gap that there just wasn't somebody who could really succinctly and almost in a very trusted way come alongside our family and say, hey, here's what the options are for you, and here's how you can explore that for yourself, instead of, let me just show you a few houses and you guys can decide which one is good for you. So for me, it was really about, again, maybe taking all of that consulting experience that I'd had in the past and almost, I consider myself a real estate consultant, not a real estate salesperson. I really work with my clients to understand what's happening in their life, what's important to them in terms of a lifestyle. How do they, envision themselves, not just today, but what does their life need to look like in 10 years? And so that's really what, when I saw that gap, I thought, okay, I think there's something unique here that I could do. And thankfully I have a husband who is so supportive of me doing that. And, here I am.
Yeah. So there's a few things I want to dig into, and I'm going to, as our friend Richard would say, gas you up a little bit. So when I first discovered you, I thought, look at this Pinterest influencer person in Edmonds who's always so beautiful and shows off these houses so well. And then also really supports the community along the way. So the way that you talk about your purchase gifts, for example, the things that you give to your clients, they're all Edmonds specific for the most part. And you call out the shops where you get them. You also make these really awesome videos and reels around town, like you said, showing the lifestyle of this is what you're choosing in Edmonds, and this, for example, the new Seaview Park, and taking your kids there and showing how cool and accessible that park is. And I feel like your marketing background helped you understand how to do those things and do them well. And I do find that that's super unique. It's not just a person, especially now, my husband, I've told him he should have gotten his real estate license, especially to try to buy over on the other side, because it's so different over there.
It is so different. Yeah.
But the way that you think about how to celebrate people and be a partner with them, not only in the community, but with these families, I think is really special. So I want you to know that people are seeing that. And I would think too, if there are families moving to Edmonds and people who are techie Seattleites, I mean, there was a house for sale down the street from us that was epic views, but we thought that whoever bought it was going to do a tear down, and they're actually completely renovating it, which is cool. But when it was for sale, we happened to walk down the street and we saw I kid you not, 6 Teslas just lined up in a row, last summer when it was super crazy, with all these moms, they were not paying attention at all. They were walking across the street holding their baby carriers and almost running into us to take all the photos of this house, because it was so urgent for people to get their houses, and they all had cash and were paying $200K over. And there's the brokers that we feel or he does, like cashing in on that or kind of taking advantage of that. And then there are brokers like you that are like, oh, the market is kind of wild or whatever, but I'm still here to like support this community and the people who want to be a part of it versus just riding the wave for your own benefit, which of course, like it's benefiting you guys right now. Maybe not today because everything's gotten crazy again.
Right. Things have changed so much. And I think that, when you think about the importance of someone's, it's not, it's a house purchase, right? But it is a life change. I think they equate buying a house to death or some other horribly traumatic experience, potentially a large, life experience like getting married, having a baby, or public speaking, right? Those are the things that people either fear or are big events in people's lives. So I think that when you don't take the time to really understand what your clients want and need, yes, you can sell them a house, but is that actually going to be the right house for them? And I do think there's a lot, and there's so many really good real estate agents out there, and I'm so blessed in our Edmonds community, so blessed that there's so many out there that are really grounded and making sure that our clients are really well represented. Because, at the end of the day, this is a financial and legal transaction. And I think when you are just cashing in on the fact that it's a wild market, and not to mention that it's pretty easy to get your real estate license, I think that there can be, some issues with that. I really, again, it goes back to wanting to be the broker that I wanted when our family was trying to figure out what the heck are we going to do? We love living in Edmonds, but our house is too small. We can't build. We can't do this. There was so much confusion for us. We didn't know how to purchase if we needed to sell. And it's just it can be a really overwhelming experience in people's lives. So if you don't really take the time to listen, and I think going back to my consulting experience, really sit down and, consult with them and help them understand the various options. Not that you need to have all the options, but to sit down and really, understand what they need, you can miss the mark. At the same time, yes, in the market that we've been in, you have to move really quickly and know the market really well to be able to help your clients succeed. And it has been very frustrating for a lot of people to make really great, in any other market, they would have won the home or won the offer. But, the cash that we saw in the last few years was really, I think, demoralizing and deflating for a lot of people. But I do think if, we don't, and we don't have to talk about, the real estate market and real estate this entire podcast, but I do think that there is relief coming for buyers. So if any buyers have been out there and been frustrated, just hang on. I think there's going to be a little bit of an equaling happening. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And I'm really intrigued by what you said. And this is something that I'm discovering with my clients too. And I'd love for your insight on it, is like the psychology that you're running into, because it's so emotional and so deep, like you said. And the things that are going on with people psychologically and emotionally, you're probably learning a lot about these people really quickly in a very vulnerable and intimate way.
It's such a great way to put it. I think a lot of times when I'm working with my clients, and maybe it's the same for you, it almost feels like we're in this very intense experience for, maybe 2 or 3 months that feels like a year. So you're right. We get to know each other really well. And I think at the end of the process, a lot of times it's, I'll get a text from my clients and say, oh, I don't get to see you this weekend, because we've been so part of each other's lives. But I do think, part of being a good consultant in any industry is really sitting down and thinking about the things that are going on for your client, because it never is just about the purchase of this home or the sale of this home. A lot of times those things are happening around really great events in a family's life, and sometimes in a tragic event. I've had clients where both parents passed away in a very short period of time, and now they need to sell their childhood home. And so when you really tune into okay, what's happening here? What's actually going on around this experience for this person? And how can I put myself in their shoes, essentially, um, and orient what I know to be a really good process, right? Because I've come out of this consulting experience, I have a really dialed in process, but how can I um, mold it and, change it to really fit the unique circumstances that this client is dealing with? And I'm sure you probably have that too, right? With some of your clients, it's never just about the copy or the article. It's all about all of these other things happening in their business that brings you to this one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm working hard to help solve that for them. And at least in my business, where I'm meeting people when they think they want one thing, but maybe they don't actually. Like, I just had this
Mm-hmm.
experience this week with a client that said they wanted a sales page, and then we presented it and they said it's too salesy. So it felt
Right.
to them like this isn't what we want, but sometimes they need to see, just like in your industry, like they need to see what they
Mm-hmm.
don't want or what they can't
Mm-hmm.
afford to know
Right.
what they
Exactly.
do. I even
Yeah.
had one
Yeah.
reach out and want 90 descriptions of these travel locations that were 150 to 350 words each or something. And I was
Oh my
like, you
goodness.
realize that, and using that as a test for a project. And I really,
Mm-hmm.
really like them. But I
Mm-hmm.
was like, you realize for a project, that's going to cost you a lot of money, like multiple thousands
Mm-hmm.
of dollars. So why don't
Mm-hmm.
we break it up into these subsets and help me understand your budget? I'm sure you deal with a lot of that, like people, champagne taste.
Mm-hmm.
We have that problem
Yeah.
where we're like,
We do too.
we,
I do too. I do too. It's sometimes, yeah, there's a lot of sticker shock. I will just kind of going back to that example that you just mentioned, in my previous life, same thing. I'd have clients come and say, hey, we have this marketing issue. And you go off and you work on the marketing issue and you present it back to them and they say, no, that misses the mark. And I think what I learned through trial and a lot of fire, I will say, in late nights was really trying, just peeling back the onion, right? And saying, okay, you're
Mhm.
saying you want this. And this is still what I do with my clients now. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you say you want a walkable community, but you also say you want this type of house. What does that mean? Right. And just pulling
Mhm.
it back and pulling it back and asking them questions that, um, really get down to, okay, you don't actually want a walkable community, or you don't actually want this big house. You want to feel like you haven't actually left the Seattle community because you feel like moving too far north means you're old. I mean, I get
That's
a
so
lot of that.
funny.
And where,
Yeah.
people like you mentioned, tech entrepreneurs or people who work for Amazon or, are starting to build families, the idea of moving outside of a certain area is terrifying to them because now that means they're old, right? Oh, and now I'm I'm living in suburbia when I always thought I would live in like the Green Lake area. I always thought I would be this type of a person.
Ugh, I
Um,
never thought
so
about it that way. Although I did say, like, I love Edmonds because everybody's retired, and why not live the retirement life now? So for me, and that's funny too, because that's like all perspective, like the stories we
mhm,
tell ourselves are important, and like what a house represents to people and what they think it says about them is kind of a
mhm,
wild thing that I never even considered.
mhm. It really is. And actually, a lot of times what I will do is, to your point earlier, we will go out if I'm working with a buyer and they say, hey, this is the kind of home I'm looking for, we will go out. And I know some real estate agents say, I'm not going out with you unless you bring your checkbook with you, which is basically like, have your earnest money in your pocket and we're going to make an offer. And
Wow.
there's a great reason to do that. I think, real estate agents want to make sure they're not wasting their time. And so I understand that, but I like to start with a coffee date. Basically, we do a discovery meeting, we get on the phone or do a virtual call, and then we go out and we grab coffee, and then we see homes, at every spectrum. And I select some, unicorns and some ones that I think that are dogs, and just give them that real perspective, like you said, of what their budget can get them, what's way outside their budget. And then also sometimes there's some ones in there that are like, hey, remember you wanted this perfectly ready move in, or perfect move in ready home. It's way outside your budget, but check out this house that, you just need to do some minor updates to and some paint, that could be an option, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all about, to your point, perspective, leading clients in a kind of a gentle but strategic way, right?
Yeah.
And helping them understand, just like you said with your clients, helping them understand really the ramifications of different types of decisions that they can make.
Mm-hmm. And what's cool too is like with this project that I mentioned, we are learning along the way, like, oh, like there's a lot of different ways to sell. You know this, but we were like, they want the soft sell. Like they said sell, and we just assumed hard sell because they said they wanted it to be national or whatever, but you can soft sell something. So we're learning to ask those questions up front, which you can only really do by doing versus like if we've never done a sales page on a website before, we might not know to ask that question because all I know is that what I've learned about marketing and selling and how I would think about it to blast it out nationally. But if it's part of your soul, what you're selling, then yes, of course, it makes sense to have it be a little bit softer. And so it's great learning for me in all the projects that I do. And you probably run into this with your clients too, where it's like sometimes it's a short term relationship and you never see those people again. And you have to know them, get to know them really quickly. And that's always awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have people that you're working with all the time that you just get into this groove that's more comfortable. And for me, I'm trying to figure out like, okay, I obviously prefer the longer term partnerships, and it almost feels like, oh, we get to this place where I finally get you and then
Mm-hmm.
you're gone with the shorter
Mm-hmm.
term projects.
Yeah, I know. And and it's when you're doing the kind of work that we do, although we're in different industries, I think when you I do what I do because it is a soul-led job, right? I could have stayed in the previous industry and done that forever. But there's this pull, there's this thing that you're intended and meant to do. And so when you throw yourself into a role like that, and when you are quickly, like you said, sort of bonded in these funny ways with clients, it is um, it is kind of uh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. It is a little bit of like a jarring experience for everybody. But I do think that when you when you do take that approach, right? Like it isn't just um, a house that we're purchasing or a sales page that we're doing. In a lot of cases, we're transforming people's lives. We're transforming people's businesses, right? And so that's just such a I really think of it as a kind of a sacred role. And I had a few of my clients recently just celebrate some pretty big life milestones, and I always just love to keep in touch with them. I think really when you are part of someone's life like that, even in a marketing role, right? You can really create meaningful relationships and stay in touch with them in a way that adds value to them and also equally adds value to you. Because if you do the kind of work that you're so good at, Whitney, people are going to be sending you referrals like crazy, right? The same for me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about your specialization in buying and selling at the same time, because that was a fear of mine. I told you this when we were on our walk of how when we moved to Edmonds, we were lucky enough that, and I love honesty. So we were lucky enough that we had family money, not our money, but we were loaned money to float buying the house that I'm sitting in right now because I came over to Little Bipsy to get my friend a birthday present, and it was at the end of the farmers market. It was so magical, and we had been kind of manifesting this house in Richmond Beach was where we were looking just because it was beautiful and close to the freeway. And then my husband had favorited this house on Redfin. Like I said, he is a big fan of real estate. And that's why I was like, you need to just like dig into this so you could have your license and use
You
it whenever.
should.
You probably hate hearing that, but
No, I do. I think you should. Absolutely. I
I just,
absolutely think you should.
I have all the life plans for everybody. I even texted my cousin last weekend and I was like, I'm going to pull a grandma on you because our grandma's really bad about this.
Hmm.
And I have a new life plan for you. Can you come over? Because my husband was golfing. I couldn't go to her. And she was like, sure. So I was like, I'm not as intense as grandma about it, but I have these ideas of how you should run your life. And anyway, I think it'll benefit you. So I do the same to my husband all the time. He's like, I don't know
Love it.
where
Love it.
you think I'm getting the time for this. Anyway, he had favorited this house. Our son was like a year old at the time and he was napping. So I came during nap time, those precious hour
Oh my
couple.
gosh.
He took
Yes. Yes.
until he quit too young, in my opinion. He
Same.
napped
We have
for
the same problem.
up to 2 hours. Both my kids cut their naps by 2.5, which was awful.
Oh, that is awful.
But what was so cool about coming over to Edmonds, it was like the magic got me. And then I was like, oh, I might as well check out this house that my husband had favorited. We weren't even in a place to buy anything. So we had to ask like my stepfather to float us the money that we would be making on our house in Seattle at the time to buy this house, because I was, and thank God I had that opportunity and that kind of, the word now is privilege that I could do that.
Yeah.
But, and so many people can't. I mean, even
Right.
buying our first house, we didn't have the down payment. My mom had to use some of my dad's death insurance money that she was holding on to for fear of whatever could happen to her. And she finally was like, well, I think he would want to gift this to you. So we couldn't have done any of this if it wasn't for family support, especially in how the markets have been historically.
Right.
But when we bought this house, it was 2018 and it was not crazy. The broker was sitting alone here during her open house. And I was like, okay, when do I need to get my offer? We
Can
had
you
to
even imagine? That seems like such a fantasy now.
Yeah, we had to figure out. So my business was only about a year old and they wouldn't recognize my business. So that's part of why we're like, okay, thank God we have George to like float this money for us for the down payment. And we paid him back within like a week because our house sold so quickly, which was great. And we got in here, but then with financing, they wouldn't recognize my business. So that affected things too. And once we finally got it all figured out, it was great. But like that whole process is traumatic. And I was trying to avoid the having to, or selling and then having that money and taking it somewhere, doing contingent offers and everything. So my long story long, I want to hear about like this offer that you probably created for people like me.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, the way you described that scenario is exactly what is happening for so many people, no matter what market you're in. I mean, most people are going, okay, I need the money out of the current house that I'm in to buy my next house, or I don't have any of the money I actually need, or I have a gift fund, or like I don't we want to move. We've lived in this house since our kids were born, and now they're 5 and 7 or whatever ages it might be, and they're running around like rugrats, and we can't live like this anymore. We're on top of each other, right? So that scenario you described, and also my husband and I were actually, or I think it was a girlfriend and I also went to brunch in Edmonds. I had never been there, went to Little Bipsy, same, ding, ding, ding. And I totally fell in love with Edmonds. And that's when we were like, okay, we've got to figure something out to get here into Edmonds. And we were also super lucky, I think around the same time to purchase. But anyways, most people are in that same scenario. Most people are confused, they're overwhelmed. The idea of getting your house ready to sell it. And I work with a lot of families. So a lot of times we all have junk and kid stuff, right? So how do you get your home ready to sell and also maneuver a buy? And so, yeah, I created this class. It's a how to buy and sell at the same time. There's a workbook that goes along with it. I explain some of the financial options that are available. But I will be, the first person to say that I know enough about the options that are out there from a financing perspective just to point my clients to the right lender, because the market is changing. Financial markets are changing so much that there's different loan products out there all the time that they can take advantage of. So the class is really oriented at helping people get really grounded and clear on what they want in their next home and what their current home isn't giving them. Because a lot of times it's the clarity that you need to know that this life change needs to happen. Or next step, if you found a community that you love and you just need to find a way to get in there, It's here's, the financial resources that you need to explore before we can kind of take the next step. So I really wanted to solve my own problem, which was I need someone to help me figure out how to put together this buy and sell process at the same time. And I created a class around that and a workbook around that to help it just be so intuitively led and so easy for people to sort of sort through it on their own time.
I love that. That is like music to my ears. And the other thing that is unique to you is how beautiful everything you create is. Like, did you have somebody do your branding?
No, I've done it all myself. I
Oh,
have
so you,
at times I've used, there's so many great little Etsy, options out there. And I dabbled with things on my own for a very long time. But for the
Mhm.
most part, it's me using Canva and, you know, doing my best.
Yeah, we are really good
Thank
at
you
it.
for saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, for anybody who hasn't experienced Kaylynn's social media and branding, it's all very beautiful, light, and airy. It reminds me of my beautiful peonies that are growing outside that I need to go clip
Aw.
and bring in the house. And just like it, it makes you feel held and
Aw.
also warm and fuzzy inside. And it's just so wonderfully produced as somebody
Thank you.
who has worked in various forms of content for like 15 years.
Thanks for saying that. I mean, I think again, this is such a soul endeavor for me that posting market snapshots just feels like, oh, I can't do that. It doesn't feel in alignment with who I am. And so a lot of times going back to kind of, talking about community and talking about the way I work with my clients, gifting or, contributing to the Edmonds Food Bank or, these other elements, that's where I feel, I almost feel grounded in saying, hey, I am this person that helps you get from this place in your life to this place in your life. But there's so much more about it than just, handing you the keys, right? It's really helping you understand the community and the options and the lifestyle that you want for yourself and treating you like a friend or a family member, and I think to your point earlier about closing gifts, my language is, giving gifts. I love to shower my clients with gifts. I love to do that and also support so many of our local organizations and businesses. I think you maybe feel this way too. It's like when you see a new business anywhere, in my opinion, a small business, it's like the final it's like a manifestation, right? So you and I are both small business owners. We know what it's like to sit in a room and pen out these ideas or come up with these thoughts. And it takes so much bravery to put yourself out there. It takes so much bravery to open the doors, and tell people that you're accepting new clients or whatever it is. And so I think of that as a way, for me to contribute to their business, but also to make sure that people are really being seen for being brave and for stepping
Yeah.
out. And we have so many incredible small businesses in Edmonds. We're so lucky.
What's funny about that too, and I totally with you as one of Edmonds' biggest fangirls. I think we're like twins in that.
You are the Edmonds influencer in chief for sure. Like there should be a sash for you at the Edmonds parade.
My goal is to eventually be the Grand Marshal, but
you will
not yet. I got to make some room. But I think they're having their first woman, which is wild this year.
Wild.
So I was happy about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the ways that I'm sure you've done a lot of work around this too. I just am making an assumption that you have. Like the past 2 years, I've been working on a lot of money work and stories I tell myself, inner children stuff. And I'm really seeing like the fruits of that labor now. And one of those things, like even yesterday, we went to Terry's Toy Box to get our friend's daughter a present for her birthday, which is coming up. And I had to get my kids, I try to resist this, but like when they're really great, I'm like, okay, you can have a little present too, because I like screamed my face off.
I'm not above bribing at all.
Yeah. And Toys R Us, I would always scream my face off whenever we would go for somebody's birthday party, and I would embarrass my mom, and like I was that kid. And I don't see any problem with like getting them a little something that's like $4. But our daughter, the best way to describe her in a really kind way is that she is a kinesthetic learner. So she is into everything all the time. And I got her one of these squishy, it's kind of like a stress ball, but it's like a squishy moon ball thing. And we had gone out to dinner. My husband's out of town on a work trip. I was driving them back. I turned around, and she also gets car sick. So she's very concerned about whether she's going to get car sick or not. And then I turned around, and when we got home, and she had the innards of the ball all over her. And at first it looked like throw up. I was like, oh my God. And she had dug into the ball, or she had bit it or gotten her nail under the little plug for whatever's inside.
Mhm.
And it was all over her. It was all over her chair. And I just kind of had to chuckle a little bit. And at first, my first thought was like, well, that's a wasted $5.
Mhm.
And then I was like, that's not true, because you just supported that business in your
Right.
town.
Yeah.
And I recently learned too that women, when we think about money and wealth and all of that, we have to frame it in that, like, I'm doing this a service. I'm supporting the community. This gives me more opportunity to support more people and more of my community. So it was really cool for me to be in that experience, and have
Right.
recently, even yesterday we went to Little Bipsy, we went to the toy store, and I was really proud of myself for being like, no, you're supporting the community. And then it was just over for me. Like, I wasn't mad at her. I wasn't mad at the ball. I threw the ball in the trash and wished it well and moved
Give it a little
on. And
blessing.
yeah, and felt like, these toys are all going to end up somewhere someday anyway.
Mhm.
I'm glad it gave her some joy while it did, even though I was
Right.
expecting it to last a little longer.
Maybe 2 days would have been good.
Yeah. I love thinking of it that way. Like, I used to always think of it that way and not even be aware, like, oh, this was a wasted $20. Or even I was terrified when I moved to Seattle of getting parking tickets because I was so poor. And I was like, that is like money down the drain, not that I think they use their funds well in the general
Right.
fund.
Well, I
But
think money is a really tricky thing it's a tricky thing for everybody, but I do think it's a really tricky thing for women entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general, because I've had to justify, or I've, in real estate, or in, kind of, well, let's keep it to real estate. When I get my commission check, there's so many places that commission check goes, right? It goes to half to my broker, taxes, B&O, all the things that we have to pay, right? And it's actually, you get a lot less than I think people envision. But in order for me, for a really long time, in order for me to actually accept that money, I had to justify it with a bunch of other stuff. And I do this now, and it's not, I don't justify it the same way, but I would give X amount to a pediatrics cancer organization. I would give X amount to Edmund's Food Bank, because I felt like that's when I'm deserving of it. Does that make sense? I had all of these blocks, all of these challenges around accepting money and accepting that money. I guess I'll just leave it there. Accepting that money, I felt like I had to do X amount of things. Now I contribute to those organizations for different reasons, and I do the same. I love the way you thought about it, or you think about it now. I'm going to add that in, but I would also, I support specific organizations because I know what it's like when I get a check after working really, really hard, right? When, a business is, any organization, small business, every dollar, every contribution, every tweet, every Instagram post makes such a big difference that, it's like, that's the kind of currency that, an energy that I think really matters is, helping to support those organizations. Because again, those $5 probably made a huge difference to the to that company, over during that day.
And I would never want them to close. I mean, they've been around since
Can you imagine if they weren't there?
Yeah, people who are my age shopped there when they were kids, and now they get to bring
Mm-hmm.
their kids. And to
Mm-hmm.
think of like something like that having to close because not that they need my $5, but like they need the business and something super local. And then I called my mom too, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take the kids there and get all of our toys." They just renovated their house up by you, I think, right above Picnic Point, and they need some new toys. And so I'm really glad to see how Edmonds really encourages local too. You just want to make sure Edmonds thrives because it's so cute and it's easy to get to know people. That's why I love having Workhorse as a way to like have conversations and have an inroad to people versus just my kids, which I'd love for you to speak about that too. Like, was part of, I know that real estate was something that you always wanted to do because of seeing your family and that, but did you think of it as kind of like a freedom thing of like being able to manage your family the way that you wanted to?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I I don't think I did. I think my perception was I would have a lot more flexibility than I really do. If you think about when people buy homes or when they're searching, it's when they aren't at work, right? I mean, now the pandemic has really changed the way we do things in all industries, but there's a lot more flexibility during the day, so it's easier to meet clients, it's easier to do things virtually, and you know, not necessarily evenings and weekends as much. But I will say that is a big part of the business. So it really, I think it works really well for a lot of moms. But there are a lot of sacrifices because if you're, especially in the market that we've been in, if a home comes on the market and your clients need to see it now, and you're at a soccer game, you need to really make a decision as to how you handle that. And I've been really lucky. Just recently, I brought on or joined a team, an Edmonds team, where we can help support each other because there is that need for balance, right? I mean, you can't be a great mom if you're on your phone. And I found that I was so often nose in my phone while they were doing other things at night. And I just thought, this isn't sustainable. I can't continue to ignore them. But I did, as a mom, as a working mom, someone who came out of corporate, especially pre-pandemic corporate, which wasn't as forgiving towards families, I really did feel like um, I needed more balance. I felt like I was, again, pre-pandemic, and I think it's changed a little bit, but there's this idea as a working mom that you should, or let's say just a working woman, there's a different expectation of you in the way that you show up. And so when you are a mom, you have to really balance very carefully, your time, your energy, your focus. And I will say real estate has given me more of a control of that, but there's also, in the market we've been in, a very tough time management element. I think a lot of it comes down to being really clear with what your priorities are. And it took me a long time, actually, both in corporate and owning my own business, to figure out what my priorities are. And I can say squarely now that they're my kids because,
Mm-hmm.
they're literally growing up in front of my eyes. And
Yep.
so I've had to kind of put a stake in the ground for myself and say, this is how I'm going to spend my time. And I'm hoping that is, I'm going to set expectations with my clients and do really, really good work for the right kinds of clients. And I know that that's going to be um, the road to long-term success.
So speaking of that, talk to me about your automatic reply on your email because I even commented on how it gave me life.
I know. Well, okay. So again, as someone who has been, I will say, a serial workaholic, I hit burnout. After my third child, second biological child, but my third child, I just I had to set boundaries because there's that, it's like you get an email and you feel this urge to answer right away. And I was, death by email. And at one point I just said, I can't do this anymore. So I set up an automatic response that lets clients know and anybody who's emailing me know what my response times are. That does change depending on the time of year, but usually I'm checking email in the morning, at noon, and at night. And then I also set an expectation that I don't check email after 9 p.m. So that has been really relieving to me. That has given me a sense of control over my life because before I didn't have that. It was like an email came in and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm sitting on my couch with my kids. I need to respond to this. But it's ridiculous, right? It's these false expectations we put on ourselves. And I think that our culture has put on everyone now that we have these
Totally.
devices in our pockets, right? And I think I read a study that says that we're actually less productive when we look at email on our phone and don't answer. So it's a way for me to have some control over my life. What do you do? How do you manage that, all that you've got going on, plus, mommyhood and business and all that?
So, not well. I am getting better and inspired by you too. That's why I wrote back to it. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. The way you write it is so kind. And I have gotten a lot of feedback in the past couple of years as I've leaned into my woo, which was really frustrating, where these spiritual gurus kept telling me you need to work on your boundaries. And I was like, Jesus, like, I talk about like my boundaries all the time. And the problem was that I wasn't holding them, and I wasn't holding them for myself. And I had to realize that like you're breaking your boundaries to yourself. And I've been talking about this a lot lately, where for the first time a couple weeks ago, when I was with my best friend on a girls trip, I put up my little first automatic reply on my work email saying like, I'm with my best friend. I have bad boundaries. Please help me in not emailing you back while I'm with her. I really want to focus on being with her. And so, like you said, just putting that up for myself, it's really mostly for me to hold myself accountable, because I have this wall up, for lack of a better phrase, that they see, and then they help keep me accountable to. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
like it's ever fires really for me in my
No.
life anymore, but my body still feels that way. And
Oh my
then
gosh. Yeah, I know that one.
I got rid of a lot of my clients where I was managing their social media, because it just became too
Mm-hmm.
much when I had 10 Instagram accounts on my phone
Oh my
and had to
gosh.
do community management too. So I don't do
Mm-hmm.
that anymore. And then a couple weeks ago, through a tweet that I saw randomly with somebody mentioning it, I put an app on my phone that keeps me off of Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. It makes
What is
me,
this?
it's called Screen Zen, and
Okay.
you have to tap the button. You set up your own little parameters around it. So
Mm-hmm.
you could have, mine is that I have 20 opens. I don't ever use all of them per day, but I'm usually
Mm-hmm.
only ever going on Instagram because I don't really like Facebook.
I don't
But it
either.
applies to all of them. So it's cumulative between the three. I tried to put it
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter too, but it didn't stick. So I'm like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter doesn't suck me in the same way that the others do.
Mm-hmm.
So I set my limit for 20 minutes at a time too. So I
Oh,
can
that's
only
so
be
great.
on there for 20 minutes. So I have to be super intentional with my time on it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really changed my relationship with social media in a super positive way, because I try to open the app, and then the other app loads, and it gives me like a couple second countdown, and
Oh
then
my
it has the
gosh.
button. You can say, I don't want to open this. And then
Mm-hmm.
it gives you a little confetti, like, good
Oh,
job of
yeah,
like
good job.
not getting
Yeah.
on here. And
Yeah.
then otherwise I'm just sitting there waiting for it to tap the button to say, yes, I do want to get on here. And
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's,
it's like a mini intervention, right? I mean, I've gone
mhm.
through so many digital detoxes in my life, and the crazy thing about it is, even when you're super intentional and you know that you don't want to use that app or X apps, it's so habitual, right? Like, I'll grab my phone and I'll know that I'm not using Instagram for a week, and the first 3 days even when I don't realize I'm doing it, I'm standing at the grocery store, I'm doing whatever thing, I find myself going to the app and just tapping on the app. And I'm like, what am I doing? And I will say I now have a really healthy relationship with Instagram. And I think I've actually just even in the last few weeks, have kind of removed some things and changed some things around. I'm removing myself from it, but I think it can be a really positive place for people. It can also be a really negative place, even when it's just friends, right? That's like the age old conversation we're all having about comparison and all of these things. And I, I think it's the habit of it, right? Is just for me, I find it to be something that I'm constantly reevaluating and going, okay, is this actually, what is this serving? Am I creating content because it makes me feel good? Am I creating content because it's going to entertain or educate someone? Am I actually landing it? And I'm so glad thank you for saying what you said earlier about the content that I've created, because sometimes, the comparison thing gets me for sure, where I'm looking at what other brokers are doing and they post about the houses and all these things. And I'm going, oh my gosh, well, my grid should just be just sold, pending, market stats, but it just doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't feel like something that I want to put out into the world. And it's great for some people. It works perfectly for them. But just to go back to some of your previous guests, I'm a projector. So I am very, it's what I put out into the world is very energetically led. It's very intentional. If I'm, putting something out into the world, it's pretty personal, and so I have to be really careful about what I'm putting out, but I also have to make sure that it's done with the right energy and intention, that maybe there's no likes on this post and I have to be okay with that. But it took me a really long time to figure out that it's okay. That especially as a projector, people aren't going to actually like this post unless they actually need you or they resonate with you, or, it's touches their soul in some way. So it's like the way I look at social media now is so different. It's like, I don't even, if I'm not in flow with it, if the energy isn't there, if I don't feel like doing something, I'm just not going to do it, because it's the wrong approach to it. It's not helpful for anybody.
I can't stand when people just have the goal of being viral, which is a problem a lot of clients who don't understand how to think about social media will think about it. Like, how do we go viral? Like, oh boy, this is a flag.
Oh boy. Well, and it's so funny because I do have a lot of people that I'll talk to, real estate agents or small business owners, and they say they want to, create content for Instagram and they want to get, X amount of likes. They want to have all these followers. And I think that there's this trap that a lot of people fall into, where it's like that you have to have 10,000 followers, right? That used to be the big mark. It's not so much anymore, but you have to have thousands of followers and hundreds of likes, and you need to kind of be Insta famous or whatever, TikTok famous. I actually think you don't need that at all. I actually just think you need a really you need a community and people that trust you. Like if you walked into a room and you had, you said something great about your business or you promoted something and 25 people listened to it and thought it was amazing, you'd be super excited about that, right? So it's like, I think we have this weird perspective of what is actually success.
We just had a vision boarding session at Workhorse earlier this week.
Saw that.
And when we first were thinking about it, we were like, oh, should we think of a number of people that we would want? And we kind of had maybe 20 would be great. And I actually had no insight or control into the signups, which was great for me, because otherwise I would be like, I don't know. I don't think I would be looking at it that much, but I didn't even know how many people were showing up. And so when they all did, and there was probably, I'm going to say 14 because it's my favorite number. I actually didn't count them, but about 14 women there. I was thrilled that they cared to learn about my hobbies and do these things with us. And so many of them I didn't even know. I felt like they were magical little people that just showed up out of nowhere. the Tupac thing when they had him at Coachella. He just like
Oh
showed up
gosh,
as
the
this
hologram.
apparition or whatever. Yeah, a hologram. I was like, this is crazy. Like you exist and you're paying attention, and
And there's
I don't.
14 of you or whoever. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like these are actually real people that, and yeah, that's amazing. And the thing about like, I think about social media and just the world opening up is that it feels so big that the smaller, more intentional relationships, I think, get lost. And actually, I'm about to do this when we come back from Italy. I'm going to go off of social media for probably 2 weeks, and I'm setting a goal. It'll help me stick to this. But instead of messaging people, I'm going to text them or call them because I just feel like I don't reach out to people that way enough. I use social media to stay up with them, and that's great, and I love that. But actually, I had this weekend is the memorial of one of my friends, or life memorial. She passed away unexpectedly, and it's just one of those moments where yes, we connected with each other on Instagram and Facebook and all the things, and I thought that always on her birthday I would say how special she was to me, but I should have called. I should have texted. Facebook, Instagram, it's not enough, and I don't know if it's the Italian air here. I don't know what it is, but it's just really making me feel like I want to really invest back into relationships and people. And there's a place for social media, but I want to be active in people's lives.
Yeah. And what I love, which I'm sure you're already good at that you just didn't mention, is snail mail. A beautiful card and putting a
Oh, I
heartfelt
love
note
it.
in it. I love
Oh
a
my
stamp.
gosh.
I
Same.
love washi
Same.
tape,
Oh my
putting
gosh,
that
the
in the
whole
mail.
thing. Yes. And to
Yeah.
plug a few, the Papery and Edmonds, fantastic. Moss and Morgan, amazing for cards. I mean, I just go in there and spend like Crow too, great cards. Go in there and just spend so much money. And sometimes it is kind of like, oh my gosh, did I just spend this money on cards? But I've gone into friends' houses or, later and seen my card displayed somewhere. And it just makes the feeling of getting a card from somebody. It's like, wow,
Especially a beautiful card. Like
Yeah.
and Little Bipsy has a nice little section too.
Oh, they
And then they
do.
just
Yes, you're right.
opened the paper feather, like right on
I've
4th. So
heard,
when you
yeah.
get back, you have to come check it out. And I actually hyperventilate every year during the Urban Craft Uprising in whatever they call the event, like Edmund Spring Fest.
Yeah.
And there's usually a few letterpress card people. Oh, I just go nuts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I used to work for a letterpress branding company early in my career, and I just geek out on all of it. It's amazing. I love that kind of stuff. Yes, snail mail is my jam for sure.
We are just two peas. I want to move on to really quickly trying to do rapid fires rapidly, which I'm not good at. And we make the rules so they don't have to be rapid. But if you want to be rapid, like very first thing that comes to mind, tell us what you're proudest of in your business right now.
My proudest moment right now is that I'm in Italy and my business is running. We have 3 or 4 clients under contract. I've got amazing partners, and I've delegated, and I would never have done that in previous years.
Okay,
So
I'm going to snap
really
because that's major. That's what I'm working on.
It's so hard. It is so hard. And actually, remembering Kristen Swanson's episode, you talked about delegating and letting go and what it means, and how, there's so much, especially as a small business owner, right? We're so careful of our time. We've built these relationships. We've worked so hard to get these clients on board that we want to serve them, and we want to do it the way that we want to. But I think when you can really be intentional about how you serve people, and the fact that you have to have a life. We have to do things, right? And so, delegating was a major, major step for me. It took a few moments of hyperventilating, but I'm so proud of the work that we're doing for clients, and so grateful to be here drinking wine while we're talking on this podcast.
I love that for you. And something Mackenzie told us too is like she learned recently that you should be in a place in your business where you can leave for 4 weeks and it'll run itself. Yeah, so that's her next goal. When I say I'm working on it, that's not just me being like, yeah, I'm going to work on it. I actually talked to somebody, he sent me his W-9, and he is on my team helping me write things now that are not necessarily things that have to have my name on them, like all my admins things that I write. So it's really exciting for me to be in a place where I can kind of think of what's the next level for me, and knowing that there are people around like you and Kristen and Emily who are expanders for me in that way. It's just more like, cheerleading to do it.
It is possible. Yeah. And it only makes
Yes.
you better. It makes you better for your clients. It really, truly does. And
Yeah.
so when you give yourself space, this is what I think I'm realizing here, being away from the business and knowing that clients are seeing homes and going under contract. It's that I'm coming back. I'm going to come back totally recharged, right? And that much better to lead the team and be intentional in what I'm doing. But I'm also giving space for other people to grow and other people to have business, right? And
Yeah.
do what they do really well. So it's exciting. And congrats to you too. I think that's such a huge step for you
Thank
going
you.
forward.
When I stopped telling myself that there weren't other people who could write as well as me, and actually was referred a person, and I talked to him, on that call, I was like, I'm so excited to be able to support your business and help you launch your freelancing situation. And he and his husband are trying to adopt a child too. So I'm just like, this is amazing that I can help support you. And again, another thing that I hadn't been thinking of that way because I had such a tight grip on whatever for whatever reason. And now I'm just like, this is exactly how I want to thoughtfully bring people onto my team. And it just feels so good.
Oh,
Especially when I know upfront that they're good. Part of my thing was
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to like have to train somebody how to put an apostrophe in the right place,
Right.
What's a book you read or a podcast you listened to recently that changed the way you're thinking about your life or your business?
Such a good one. So I have a hard time reading a lot, so I do Audible. But the podcast that I would suggest any women listen to is Meditations for Women. And they have a ton of really great affirmations, guided meditations, everything from helping you release anxiety before you go to sleep, especially given all the news cycles that we're all constantly bombarded with, to waking up, standing in your power, being confident. I mean, this podcast, it really has changed my life. I mean, any given day, I'm listening to maybe one or two of the episodes and really trying to just ground myself in either waking up with a grateful heart or going to bed and releasing all the things that are chugging through my brain before I go to sleep. So I would definitely recommend it.
I'm going to check it out because the releasing part is something like I've been better about mornings, but the releasing at night I'm not as good at yet. And I can't stand waking up anxious because of what I was thinking about, like as I was going to bed or being on my phone.
Oh, it's so good. And one that I really the one episode I will say has really impacted my life, again, kind of going back to my resistance around when I would receive a commission check and all of the things that I had to go through mentally. She has a podcast episode. I think it's Receiving. I think it's just titled Receiving. And it's all about when you know that you put goodness out into the world, when you are so supportive of people around you and you're just a giver, you also have to receive, right? And so it's this whole guided affirmation, guided meditation around receiving goodness too and not blocking it. And it was something I listened to probably for 3 to 4 months in a row every single night to go to sleep to. And it really changed over time, right? One day it was like, oh, okay, I'm receiving compliments now. And I'm not saying, I'm not pushing them away or just little tiny things here and there, but it's such an incredible podcast.
And that's cool that it's just free.
It is. You can obviously subscribe to her Patreon or something like that, but which I do.
I need to be better about the Patreons. I always want to support people and consider it and then forget. So
I'm
same
the
with
same way.
NPR. I'm like,
I'm
I
the
should
same way.
send my donation to NPR on their latest thing.
Mm-hmm.
What would your last meal be?
Oh, my last meal would be um, a big plate of burrata cheese, tomatoes, basil, like salt, and then, like a great glass of wine. That
Caprese.
would be caprese, yes. And actually, there is an appetizer at Apulo that's like that would be the meal. And I get
Okay.
that for dinner every time when I go there.
I was just talking about Ipulo because I'm like, you guys, I don't think it's the best. And they're like, you're not ordering the right things.
You might
So
not be ordering the right thing. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm gonna go back with an open heart. Not that I thought it was bad by any means. I'm just like, this is maybe not my spot. But
Yeah, my husband
I,
is a major fan and he gets this stroganoff, beef stroganoff, and he also gets, or is that what it is?
I think that's what they
Uh,
were telling me to get. Yeah,
it's
some
so good. I think that's what it is, the short rib stroganoff.
yes,
Oh my
that's
gosh,
what they
it is
said. You have to
so
get
good.
that.
Mm-hmm. It's so good. And they have a great wine list. So,
Okay.
yeah.
What is the best business purchase you've made in the last 6 months under $100?
Good question. Okay, some number two pencils, freshly sharpened.
Ooh.
Love new pencils. They just make it's like you can write so beautifully and write out all your plans in a notebook. I will also say for anybody who's, dabbling in social media or has got social media going, if you do not have a content planner like Later or, Planoly, I think is another one. I use Later. It's like
I do
I think
too.
it's 13. Do you use it?
Yeah, I use
It's
later.
like $13 a month, I think, and it makes just the world of difference. So I would
Hmm.
say number two pencils, sharpen them, do some good thinking with some good coffee, and an Instagram or social media planner.
As I love a pencil, as a left-handed person, I've struggled with
Mm,
them a little bit because of my
yeah,
drag.
right. My mom's the same way.
That's
Same
funny.
way. I bet you have beautiful handwriting. I also love a really nice felt tip pen. There's something so
Uh-huh.
great about a really nice pen, which goes back to writing cards for people. I
Hmm.
love to get beautiful pens and just, I don't have great writing, but it does make me feel a little bit more confident.
I've stolen quite a few nice hotel pens too. Plus, it's like the
Good tip.
memory. Yeah.
Hmm. Right.
And finally, what is lighting you up lately?
Lately, I'm just so present with our kids, and it's maybe going to get me a little emotional. They are literally growing up before our eyes, and I'm watching these three boys just become people, and I am just really digging being part of their life. And I think there's this part of me that's starting to see, I've always been really grateful for my parents, but they've been grandparents now for a really long time, and I'm starting to see that I'm going to be a grandparent one day. And so I'm really just
Wow.
trying to
Yeah.
be really present with my kids, and I want a relationship with them when they're adults. So I'm
Hmm.
trying really hard not to be transactional with them and just to really understand who they are. And we're they're just awesome. So that's what's letting me. I mean, it's investing in these relationships with these little humans is kind of the most important thing for me right now.
Yep. And what you said about your parents too, that's like part of our motivation for this other property is
Mm-hmm.
me in this like beautiful vision of my life of like my kids and I walking to my grandparents' house. They're 94 and
Yeah.
93. And for the last like few years of their lives, being able to participate in their garden. And that's where my dad
Mm-hmm.
is buried. So just
Aw.
being closer to things that really matter and have a
Mm-hmm.
comfortable bed is like ultimate luxury
Yes.
to me. I'm like
Mm-hmm.
actively manifesting our avocados. And so I'm like in my
Wow.
avocado mattress, like 30 minutes from Wenatchee, living the
Oh, love
life.
it. Yeah. Can we talk about manifesting for a second?
Sure.
So we're on this trip I'm in Italy with my son Jax, who's playing soccer, and then the rest of our family's coming in a few more days. But we try to talk about manifesting. We try to talk about different things every once in a while. And we were sitting around our table, I think 3 months ago, maybe, and we're all just going around and what would you like to do? And what would be your big, a big thing that you want to have happen in the next year or something like that. And my middle son, Jax, listed out, I want to go to Italy and I want to travel to Rome and I want to go to France and I want to do all these things. And it was just this like fun, playful conversation. And I just said to him, well, the best way to do that would be to like get on some US soccer team and they take you to Italy. And we all just laughed. And I kid you not, the next day he got an invitation to try out for a US team to play in Italy and travel around and have this incredible adventure. And we were like,
I love that's
right?
So crazy.
Isn't that crazy? I mean,
Yeah.
It was like, it was so unbelievable. And it's, I really do believe in what you put out into the world and how you show up. And I think it's so great that you're showing your kids that, creating the life that you want is possible.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say to you. Yeah. That you showed him that it was possible and then he believed it clearly. And then it just showed up. He's probably a really quick manifester. That's the feedback I always get.
I think he is. Yeah. Yeah. And this whole trip, I think he's having a fantastic time. I think he's a little annoyed with me every once in a while because I'm whispering in his ear when I get to see him. Remember, you said you wanted to do this. So I think he's like, yes, I get it, Mom. I put this into the world and here it is. But it's so fun to see them do that too, because, when I was a kid, I don't necessarily think that my parents were in tune with that kind of thing. And so I want to give them, I want to at least get them on the path to see what they want is possible.
And what I've noticed too is like, no matter how they phrase it, whether it's like a God thing or just like I wrote down a list, and whether they use that language or not, all of the great people whose things that I've read, total manifestations, like, and they don't have to use that language or think of it that way. Even George, who was able to loan us this money for our house, was he puts it more in a God context. So does little Bipsy, but you can tell she like manifested all of it. And
for sure. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how, like what you call it. It's all about intentionality and believing that things can be possible for you. And I, believe that in my soul. So
yeah, I agree.
How can people find you? How can they follow you when you actually are on social media?
Yeah. So I am at Kaylynn Kelley. On Instagram. I also have a website, of course, that's linked there in my bio, but you can go to KaylynKelley.com, find out all of the classes around how to buy and sell. If you have questions about Edmunds or what the process looks like, I would be delighted to chat with you. And I will be posting on social media, but always a great way to get in touch with me is just going on the website and clicking connect.
Yeah. And you can be like Khloe Kardashian's new ethos, which is to post and ghost. And you can do that through your later stuff, which like,
right.
You don't have to follow all the weird new rules to like beat the algorithm around like, oh, you have to be commenting 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after. Just put it in later, post and ghost. You'll get to it when you can.
Yeah.
So it's good for the people to know that.
It is good for the people to know that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoy Italy, and we will catch you on the next episode of The Coast. Thanks, Kaylynn.
Thanks, Whitney.
This episode's music was provided by Sloan Best.
And editing provided by Kayla Shue.